Hello, it's Brad Laurie, your Blockchain Brad, and today a very special interview with something you may not know about. Today we're talking about two very important startups. One is called the Acala Network and the other is called the Laminar Protocol. To do this, we have two very important people with us. They are co-founders of both those teams. Firstly, welcome to Bette Chen. She is, as I said, the co-founder and someone who's very prominent in the blockchain space. Bette, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. And also, as I mentioned, we have another co-founder. His name is Ruitao. He is well known also, very focused on the technicalities of blockchain and really leading out what can be done when it comes to finance. So thank you also for being here to explain what you're doing with both these networks.
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Now, for all of those listening and for transparency, especially given that blockchain's all about that, this is entirely free. There is no personal gain for me doing this, except for the most important thing of all, and that's education for us all. And once again, thank you to anyone who provides that, and the team is the most important source. So let's get into this, guys. Let's start with Acala, the overarching network that really underpins Laminar. We'll get to that later. To Bette, obviously you've done a great deal in trying to lead out the engineering, the technicals, the deep stuff when it comes to Acala. But with a higher sort of view of this, or a more of an overview, how would you encapsulate Acala so that perhaps the broader audience can understand? What's it all about?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Bradley. If your audience may be familiar with Polkadot, and Polkadot is painting a multi-chain future. So in a world that we don't believe there's one chain can rule us all, because change is imminent, and then also diversity and variety and people's choices are also diversified, right? So, and then in the Polkadot world, it connects all sorts of different types of blockchains and what they call heterogeneous chains together. And then on this interconnected blockchain world, and what Acala is set out to do is to be the DeFi or finance chain that specialize in the domain of finance and building infrastructures, building all the base layers so that others can come on to this specialized shard or specialist chain to continue to build on top of it. And we'll see a flourished ecosystem with a lot of finance oriented apps that will utilize, the optimized facilities provided to actually innovate. And that's sort of what we foresee will happen for Acala.
Right. And it's interesting you say this, because right now we hear the words or the phrase DeFi very prominent, especially in the context of the Ethereum ecosystem. But really, you're pushing the boundaries, you're pushing the potential as well, moving into what we'll discuss later, which is more of the Polkadot ecosystem, more about parachains, and even more broadly with your agnostic design, because you aren't just about one specific blockchain, in fact. So let's dig a little bit deeper. Now, with regard to the network itself, when we're talking about Acala, we're talking about stablecoins as well, the potential for really enfranchising really a stability in this sense. So do either of you want to touch on the fundamentals of Acala in terms of how important it is to have an overarching stablecoin that can really integrate into a broader blockchain network?
Ruitao, you want to take that?
Yeah. So I think so we were building on top of Polkadot, right? So what we want to build is like stablecoin is definitely one of the key elements if you want to enable DeFi to any sort of network. When we were building on Polkadot like this, when we studied about half years ago, this fundamental building block were lacking. So stablecoin is one of the important focus of the Acala network, but it's not the only focus of the Acala network. In fact, the current Acala network has three core components. So there's the stablecoin, which is MakerDAO inspired over collateralization stablecoin. You can collateralize Bitcoin, you can collateralize DOT, you can collateralize any sort of valuable asset that will be available on the Polkadot. And that echoes with the Polkadot's design of the interoperability. We presume that in the future, there will be quite a number of valuable assets that's gonna be available and circulating on the Polkadot through the Parachain, through the interchain communication foundation that's built by the Parity team. And what's the Acala network is able to capture like those assets and release their utilities. So you can characterize Bitcoin, you can characterize maybe at some stage Ethereum, you can characterize the native dot token. So that is one of the core focus. But other than stablecoin, we are also building the two very important components for the DeFi foundation layer for the Polkadot network. There will be a built-in decentralized exchange. It's not only a decentralized exchange; it's also the one of the main source of liquidity. So with the flexibility that we are able to design, given the Substrate framework, we can say that fee can be paid in different type of tokens, and that decentralized exchange will become the source of liquidity for that. There will be also source of liquidity in case like a liquidation happens. And we think it's work best if we combine those two protocols together by working as like the foundation piece of the Lego blocks. We also have one of the supporting component, which is Liquidity. It's about state liquidity, providing liquidity for staked assets. Also very important if you want to think about, you want to build a characterized network, stablecoin on top of proof of stake network, because the asset itself, like DOT, can be staked, it also can be locked for generating stablecoin. So you are pretty much have a conflict of interest here. But in the blockchain world or in the Polkadot world, your money could be in two places. And that's why we think like this is also a companion protocol needed for us for the stablecoin in Polkadot to take off. So I mean, in fact, Acala Network is like a set of building block to enable DeFi, to enable anything that would be otherwise impossible in the Polkadot system. Our position is that we are going to be the DeFi or the finance specialized parachain in Polkadot.
Right, and you raised a really good point, and thank you for clarifying that. So you're far beyond, you know, when we're talking about the context, the overall position that you have in the space, and it's certainly more than just a stablecoin. So the DEX, liquidity measures or provisions, very detailed, and we will discuss those in detail, and obviously the stablecoin itself. So for those wondering, there's a whole replete system being built. Now, with regard to that, some of those key features within that parachain, and for those also wondering, that's with reference to Polkadot's design. You have the stable currency, the staking liquidity, powered by Polkadot, and also influenced by ownership. So there is a lot going on there. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask either of you is the idea of the value add of multi-collateralization, because that is referenced a lot, and also the value of being community owned. So do either of you want to take on one of those parts?
I can make a start, and Ruitao can complement. And yeah, I think right at the get-go, when we were approached to consider creating a stable coin on the Polkadot ecosystem, by the Web3 Foundation, we were thinking of stablecoin as a fundamental building block. And Polkadot is very different from any other sort of standalone blockchains. It's going to be a multi-chain ecosystem, which means there will be a lot of different teams, a lot of different ideas that's going to collaborate together. And then if stablecoin is the fundamental building block, if you imagine when we all connect together, that US dollar is going to flow through all the different sort of digital jurisdictions or chains per se, then that can be owned by a single entity, and that cannot be owned by a single sort of person or team per se. It has to be something that's more community oriented or a type that's more liberating, right? So at the get-go, we formed, so there are actually two teams founding the Acala Foundation or the Acala project. Both of them are already builders in the Polkadot ecosystem. And one of them is Polka Wallet. So that's Fu Yao's team, who's based in Shanghai, China. And he's a prominent ambassador and also advocate for Polkadot very, very early on, and also Substrate builder as well. So he's heading up a project for Polka Wallet, a mobile wallet, like an entry point for Polkadot ecosystem. And then myself and Ruitao, of course, as you mentioned, we were doing the Laminar project was about synthetic asset and margin trading, more deep in the finance side of stuff. And then we came together. We both had a thought of building stablecoin at some point, or we need stablecoin at some point. And then we form a consortium. It's more like a decentralized financial consortium per se, versus the centralized version of like Libra. for example.
I see. And that's a really good, I did want to interject there. That's a good point, because that was part of my questions later. When I read about the consortium, I thought immediately, okay, is this centralized or is this decentralized? So you're saying it is possible to actually establish a decentralized consortium in the context of essentially what you're trying to talk about, which is having that stablecoin as one part of Acala represent an entire substrate, an entire Polkadot network as well. And that's a network of blockchains.
Yeah, exactly. So the way to actually approach that is, I think like A16Z's the article depicts it quite well as progressive decentralization, even though the article actually came out after we wrote our white paper and start implementing our approach. Is at the very beginning, you don't pretend to be decentralized. We don't either. So we actually form a team together, although it's formed by 2 project teams. And then we started leading the development effort. So there is a sort of focused effort with a development team there. So it is, not decentralized at the very beginning. And you actually need that as a startup at the very beginning to create what we have created so far.
Sure.
And then this is the stage, you caught us at a pretty right time, because previously we were more in a stealth mode, like building and things like that. And this is a moment where we start to transition to the next stage of progressive decentralization, where we will involve more community involvement and also giving up a bit more control of the network. And this is when we go live on the Polkadot network, we have our own governance mechanism for Acala, where is determined by the ACA, like the token holders, where they can vote for their council representatives to govern on behalf of them. And then gradually, as we move towards more decentralization, there will be democracy component being implemented on Acala, and where everyone will be able to vote for anything about the blockchain. This is including like changing the blockchain logic, as well as specific economic policies, for example, like interest rates and etc. So there's a process for that, and we're able to do that because Substrate allow us for forkless upgradability, and we can gradually roll that out so we can steer the ship to a certain degree where it's stable and safe, and then with gradually more and more people getting involved in the network and governing it. And to the end, how we measure success is one day all the founding members disappear, and then the network can still flourish and can continue its development and for the perpetual future, hopefully.
Right, and Bette, that's really well said, because obviously right from the outset, you really do need those engineering skills, all of the skill sets, in fact, with the team building this. And many people talk about DeFi, but they don't talk enough perhaps of the CeFi start, and to really build it out so that the DeFi can flourish in the future. So you've really made that crystal clear, and it's something that is emulated by some of the top teams right around crypto right now, or blockchain, in that they're taking this really seriously. Now, I wanted to ask you also, Ruitao, about just how important it is in the context, as Betty's saying, about building for a complete community-owned system in the future. You need to have the technology underpinning this that is just leading and cutting edge. Now, as I'm listening to you, I'm hearing, how much involvement you do have with Polkadot. Are you glad you made that switch and you made that focus there? Because it does seem like, they are one of the top teams when it comes to leading out blockchain innovation. And as we mentioned before, particularly when it comes to mainstream integration, using blockchain in a real world context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So, before we started this venture, we actually look at a number of options there. So there's Ethereum 2.0, there's Cosmos, and there's Polkadot. I think all these projects, all these new generation layer 1 projects, they all have their own advantage. They all have their shining points. But at the end, we think Polkadot is probably the most advanced in terms of technological achievement. And while we're working with this Polkadot teams, we have a lot of support from them. So that's one of what I would like to echo what Gavin said. Because they have this engineer focused culture, so they are able to attract other engineers. And as we are engineers, we would love to work with people. We would love to work with engineers that have shared the same vision. What Polkadot provides is like a set of code bases that allow you, one of the unique features allow you to upgrade your chain without sacrificing any sort of like usability, any sort of functionality. It's pretty much like a consensus machine with the governance built in. And that's what it really is. So the relay chain itself, it provides nothing but security, governance, and upgrades. And that's what the pure spirit of blockchain comes in. And with this latest development, that we see DeFi or anything finance on top of blockchain is still in a very, very immature status, right? So having the groundwork to guarantee that we can adapt, we can change without sacrificing any sort of like security, without sacrificing any sort of usability. I remember back then when MakerDAO did the upgrade from single collector DAI to multi-collector DAI, I need to migrate my money. Well, it is okay, given that we are such an immature status of DeFi. But if you want that to go to mainstream adaptation, and if you say that my money gonna expire at some stage unless I upgrade that, I don't think that it's like acceptable. So what Polkadot is able to provide is that this consensus machine with upgradability built in, and it's like one of the unique advantage that we see within the Polkadot. The other two things I would like to mention is that first, when we're working on Substrate, on Polkadot, it's pretty much cutting edge development. We have a lot of support from Parity. We have a lot of support from the Web3 Foundation. So they're pretty much right there for us if we have questions. And as you may imagine, because we're working with cutting edge technology, there's sometimes there's lack of documentation. There's like new stuff that have been overlooked. What Parity and what Web3 Foundation is able to support us, they connect us with the core engineers with their sides. There's also the Substrate builder programs, so we feel very, very well supported.
Right.
That's one thing. The other is that we also feel right at home. There's like, we're not the only one building on top of Polkadot. There's like at least 20 or 30 teams that we know of that's currently building on top of Polkadot. It's like a real ecosystem.
Exactly.
There's someone, yeah. So that is like this advantage, or we feel right at home when building on the next generation layer 1 technology.
Yes, and listening to you as well, explain those key aspects for those not quite sure what the substrate is. Obviously, it's a whole suite of applications, a suite of networks and suite of companies that are building literally on Polkadot. And then behind that, we have Parity technology and Web3 backing, you know, the developments of all of the Polkadot network. So it's really interesting that you talk about that. And also the fact that Gavin Wood, who is leading out all of these different sort of ventures, right all the way through from Web3 right across, he was the CTO of Ethereum. So he has all of that technical prowess. He really does, you know, having been one of the author of Solidity, he knows his stuff. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you, Betty, is when it comes to Acala, you know, this is something that can apply right across all of the substrate, all of the different applications. So do you want to touch on just the potential scope of Acala in context?
Yeah, definitely. So how I sort of envision what the future might look like is, I think the multi-shard or multi-chain future, because Polkadot actually occupies a very interesting design space. Because if you look at Ethereum 2.0, it is also multi-shard, but each shard is exactly the same, and it's more generalized approach for design. Whereas you look at Cosmos, it is multi-shard also, and each shard is different. However, you have to provide security for your own chain. So that is at the two extreme of design, where Polkadot is in the middle. So that's why I think Polkadot themselves or Web3 and us, we don't see like other chains or other applications as, you know, per se competitors. I think we're all sort of trying to occupy a design space, trying to grow the whole ecosystem together, like to actually increase people's awareness and also usage of blockchain. So Polkadot occupies the space in the middle where you have multi-chain, of course, as a start, but also each chain is specialized. And specialization actually breeds efficiency. And also effectiveness, because each shard or each chain is specialized to do a certain things, for example, finance or gaming or other application or social media, for example. And they all, because they're specialized and they can build more optimizations on it, right? And then at the same time, for Polkadot, it actually provides share security. which means for a shard like ourselves, like a chain for ourselves, we don't have to worry about securing our network from day one. We may graduate, right? We may graduate one day to become a fully fledged independent network, but connected to Polkadot and all the other chains together one day, and we provide our own sort of security one day, but not on day one. Because imagine, Substrate already abstract away all the buildings of a blockchain, but providing security is also another hurdle for teams coming into, building in this area. And Polkadot is sort of abstract all of those away, and then we can have the highest security on day one, basically using Polkadot's security, like staking capitalization, right, to help secure our network. It's highly important for finance specialist chain to have that on day one, rather than you gradually build that up, because you need security from day one. And I think that's also why Ethereum is like flourishing right now, is because it has that community, but also has that security from day one as well for the debt builders.
Yes, and I think you raise a really important point in that you are agnostic by design. It's not just about Polkadot, as obviously the Ethereum 2.0 vision and efforts with the staking and beyond is significant. But one thing that is for sure is that the governance model of Polkadot, being so detailed and so focused on security, really allows you to leverage that as you build and focus on what your core design is all about, so that you can essentially ride on the tech, of great, and rest on the I guess the shoulders of giants when it comes to all of the underpinning technology, and focus on what your core goal is. Now, one of the things I also wanted to ask you about was the team more generally for both of you. One of the things we talked about pre-interview, Betty, was that many of you in the team are very focused on engineering, very technical. So, is that still true in that, that's the core focus, is just building, as they say, or biddle?
Ruitao, do you want to go for that one?
Or Ruitao?
Yeah. I think it stays still true today, and I think the spirit of our company will be always engineer and technological focused. I think if we talk about this blockchain or this DeFi, I mean, down under the hood, technology still matters. It's probably the most important aspect of for a company. So for now, every single one of us have some tech background. So Betty, she used to be a software engineer before. She actually has a degree in software engineering. So, but later on, she turned on to have a degree on MBA. So she's probably like a hybrid.
To the dark side.
Wow.
Yeah. For me, I've been an engineer. I've been a developer for probably most of my life. I mean, while I don't actually code a lot from in my past few years, I still under every single bit of what we're actually doing. And it's very important that for a startup company in the blockchain space, the tech is the most important aspect, or is the most important culture for any sort of startup.
And Ruitao, it's so good to hear that from co-founders, because in the crypto domain, as you'd appreciate right now, you get a very mixed sort of bag when it comes to quality. Yeah, all the way from, so-called, I won't use the term, but it's Bitcoins, all the way through across to quality tokens that represent real utility, and also, more importantly, represent teams and tech that is real and designed for the future. So it must be interesting to see the emergence of all of this conflation, this very dynamic space. But underneath everything, really, without that team and that technology, the token means nothing. So it's, hearing that from you is really what everyone in crypto is looking for, and that is the future driven by realness.
Yeah, I think the culture, or the roots of the company should be always engineer, should be always technologically focused. But at some stage, when we face that, we need to grow. We need to make sure our product is being heard, is being used. Then we will start looking for expanding our team. There might be someone that's focused on the marketing side. There might be someone that's focused on the business development side. But down in the roots, I think every single startup and in the blockchain space should be a tech company.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm looking forward to seeing more marketing, to be honest, and more biz dev, because, you're starting from the right direction. So in the future, as you start to come out, MainNet and beyond, we do want to hear more from Acala and Laminar. Now, one of the things that's stated, I think it's in your white paper, is that you're specifically about solving two issues, and that's stability and liquidity. So just in a very general sense, do either of you want to comment on that statement, with regard to Acala's, vision?
Yeah, I'll make a start. I think as the fundamental layer for finance, as what Acala set out to do, and also the vision is to actually not just provide products, but also provide like infrastructure so other teams or apps can actually build on Acala. So we can actually have the whole DeFi or open finance ecosystem flourish on a optimized chain or high performance chain within Polkadot. With that said, though, the two most important thing to actually kickstart or bootstrap the ecosystem is stability and liquidity. And for stability, and that would start out as a decentralized stable coin. And that's our footing, right? But having said that, we also got approached by other stable coins, quite well-known ones, that want to land on Acala to reach out a more multi-chain and also higher performance use cases for their customers. And they're all very welcome because the space is very, very huge. And there's a lot of room for more than one stablecoin and also room for more than one liquidity provisioning. And then the second thing that you mentioned is liquidity. And there's two ways that we're providing that on Acala for other teams to use. One is the liquid staking. So that is pretty much unlocking the liquidity that's of DOT that's being staked, right? Because you have a competition between do you stake or do you DeFi? But we solve that with a fungible token or tokenizing your staked assets, and also providing a better, or hopefully a better sort of outcome for staking return and also better liquidity. And on top of that, there's the decentralized exchange where it serves actually multiple purposes, right? It serves as a use case for swapping tokens, but it also provides liquidity for the stable coin when it needs liquidation. And as you can see, there's a lot of liquidity farming happening on Ethereum, but the gas price is like going through the roof. Hopefully that won't happen on Acala, but you have a lot more room for you to innovate different type of liquidity provisioning and also DeFi playgrounds for people to build on top of.
Right, and Bette, you raised a really good point about it's less likely that gas prices are going to go up in that sense because of the way these is designed. Now, Ruitao, I wanted to ask you about enterprise and also regulation. Those two very important things, because one of the things about Polkadot, and we all know, is that they're geared for enterprise in the way that they've created their consensus, the way that they've created their whole core modeling is to make sure that there's finality built in, and it's to also make sure that there is very strong security to trust, ironically, as they build out a public network. So, how confident are you that enterprise, is going to be a key proponent, a key aspect of this? And I'm talking about mainstream here as well, not just, what we tend to see, which is a small crypto bubble, and also making sure that happens in concert with regulation globally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the enterprise usage, or like the focus that Parity or Substrate is seeking on the enterprise is that they have this framework, which is Substrate, right? You can use it to build your blockchain. You have the option to connect to Polkadot, or you have the option to not to connect to Polkadot. You can pretty much take Substrate and start your own chain. If you say that for the current in the current atmosphere, if an enterprise would like to start their own, let's say, consortium chain, they can pretty much take Substrate, just with few lines of updates, they can start pretty much have a secure, as long as like a federated blockchain within seconds. And that's like a great entry point to attract enterprise users, to attract enterprise attention into this space. Because we have to face the reality now, like the mainstream adaptation of enterprise into the true decentralization, it's like, it's in a glimpse of happening, but I don't see a lot of like real mainstream adaptation into the like truly decentralized fashion. But right. For now, what Parity is able to provide is that, hey, now this is framework, you can give it a try. And at some stage, if you think that your enterprise application need to talk to some decentralized finance application that already exists, then just with a flick of switch, you can pretty much like, because they're built with the same set of framework, right? So there's with a flick of switch, or maybe a little bit more than that, those different network could communicate as long as like these decentralized networks governors trust that federated network. So it's like enable the possibility for the future for integration, and that's something we really like that.
Sure. So you touched on the enterprise. That's, very clear. Now, what about when it comes to regulation? Bette, you mentioned something very important before, and that was reference to Libra. We saw the backlash from, the governments, especially in the US, when they sort of came out with their white paper, perhaps prematurely, because they really hadn't developed. Now, when it comes to some of the products that are available through Acala, we know the stablecoin's part of that, as we've discussed. Clearly, the focus is different. Clearly, it's all about decentralization from the outset. So do you want to just reference that in the context of Libra's past?
Well, that is, that's a very tricky question to answer. Like my opinion at this stage is that we do believe that in the future, decentralization would be, having someone truly owning their own assets with the existing legal framework within. Let's say that in the future, I do believe everyone would truly own their crypto assets, and at the current framework might need to be upgraded. But for now, we have to face the reality that there's this conventional finance system, and there's also decentralization. Like they actually have some conflicts. I don't want to comment too much about like how do we actually compile with the conventional financial system, or how the conventional finance system is able to adapt and upgrade to allow the usage of decentralized finance. I do believe that if we are thinking for a solid usage and it's providing value for the users, for the citizens, and not just to look at the downside of it, but look at the upside of it, ultimately it's going to end up in a very good way. That's what I believe.
Yes. Just to touch on that as well, as you appreciate, and I'm sure you're both aware about the progressive aspect of blockchain in Berlin, for example, where a lot of the technology research is being done and the innovation. That's also reflected with legal, developments as well. They seem to be responding very well to this development and this technology. Yeah. So in that sense, I respect that you can't comment, but it does seem to be that places like Berlin, Singapore, perhaps even, certainly even in my country of Australia, there's a lot of reaction in a positive light when it comes to legal frameworks that are endorsing blockchain.
Yeah, I think one thing you can look at is that like when the internet was first invented, there were a lot of negative outcome of a viewpoint of that. Like the internet can be used for someone to trade drugs, can be used for sending blackmail without revealing your identity, things like that. But at the end, the internet end up with like, those things, they still exist. But the good the internet able to bring is like far more outweigh the bad the internet is able to bring. Same for blockchain, same for finance, on the decentralized technology. In fact, I think given time, the whole compliance and the whole compliance of the conventional financial system might be better enforced on top of blockchain. Like if we say that this system become more mature, we can say that, hey, the governors agree that this particular address is blacklist or something like that. As long as there's consensus around that, it's like not only it's enforceable, it's like it's built in right within the code.
Exactly. So there's traceability, is what you're saying. There's
I think to sum up is like, I think the relationship is rather than one is against the other or try to revolutionize the other, is more of like we work together to evolve, to actually make this like governance, compliance, and regulation even more modern, to suit the current atmosphere, also where society is going as well. So I think there's a lot of room for people to actually help out there to build a bridge, like literally build a bridge there for, regulators and also compliance to be more modernized, basically.
Well said. And it's such an exciting time, really, because everything is so new. Now, one of the things I did want to touch on with regard to just all of the applications as well, because you have your own, as we've talked about. And one of the things that's referenced is an all-in-one DeFi service center. So Bette, what does that actually mean in the context of specifically Acala? Because we know the substrate is huge, or it's continuing to, really grow. But just with Acala, what's going on?
Yeah, so as we talk quite a bit about Acala as that DeFi shard or the special economic zone like within the Polkadot ecosystem, and then obviously once you come onto the economic zone, you can do a number of things, right? You can go to the decentral bank, have an account autonomously, and then borrow, lending, trade. And also do a number of other activities that usually you will have to go to a centralized organization to do. And then so what we've provided is to actually like a vertical integration where we have the platform itself, and then we integrate all the way through to a front end where an application is built. There's an all-in-one financial service center, so the end user can quite easily to navigate and also use the functionalities that we provide. And I think, and just like last week or the week before, we actually gone through the IDEO, like Ideal Collab, which is quite a famous UX design lab, and they're geared towards for decentralized finance application builders. And then we went through that, and then got quite good feedback on how people are actually using DeFi today. So I think for what we've provided is going to be widening the audience and also adoption for DeFi, but we don't actually stop there, because that's only the tip of the iceberg. Behind the scene, there's also a whole set of toolkits, SDKs, libraries that builders can actually build on top of Acala quite easily. Yeah.
I see. And how open source is this right now, Betty, with regard to the GitHub, with regard to access? Because obviously you've been building for some time now, well over a year. But how much can we access and really just look into?
100%.
100%. That's pretty
Yeah,
good.
it's open source from the get-go. So, and then we've gone through a number of rounds of community engagement, like a festival, like a campaign that we promote. So there are people contributing, like issuing bucks and also helping to. There's a bounties being set up. So there's quite a bit of community events happening, because from our last campaign, if I remember correctly, at one point, we had 1,400 nodes running for Acala. I think that's the highest that the Substrate ecosystem has ever had.
And that's really decentralized, in that sense, compared to a lot of the bits out there.
Yeah, right? And then we've got like 40,000 like meaningful transactions, people doing trading and stuff on top of it. So like thousands of accounts open. That's just like a test net, right? That's just like a no value test net, but we gave out some incentive for people to test out the application. So there's quite a bit of interest, and people would love to actually experience this type of new way of finance.
Yeah, and to be honest, speaking to you both, it's great to see the global network that you've worked hard to build, because often we see when I talk to different CEOs, they start with a real focus in one region of the world and then build out from there. We've referenced Berlin as one example, but you really did take a very global approach with the network of people that you have. So it's already evident in the number of nodes you have, for example, and transactions and all of the different robust sort of hive of activity that's happening. Now, underpinning this, I wanted to talk to you, Ruitao, about the protocols themselves. So there's references to 3 protocols particularly. Do you want to just, again, just a more broad overview of those protocols so that we can better understand sort of that structural integrity?
Yeah, definitely. So there's actually like the Hallmark protocol, there's the Hangzhou protocol. So the Hangzhou protocol, it's a stablecoin protocol. So it's a multi-collateral stablecoin protocol from down in the base. So what it does is that it accepts any sort of asset as long as the governance allows as a collateral, and you are able to set collateralization ratio. You're able to peg to any particular stablecoin that the Oracle can provide a price fit. So that's pretty much the groundwork for the stablecoin. And we are not limited to pegging to US dollar. We're currently pegging to US dollar, but we are not limited to that. We think as this space mature, there might be other currency that we're able to peg to. It could be like multi-collateral and multi stablecoin as well. So we can say that we also peg to maybe SDR, maybe a stablecoin with inflation rate built in. Those imagination is like those possibilities like we did within what we can imagine. So
right.
that's one of the stablecoin protocol. It handles the capitalization, it handles the price pegging, it handles the liquidation, the security of all the collectors. So that is the Honzo protocol. There's also the Homa protocol. What it does is enable a stake dot or any stake asset. When you stake through this protocol, you can get a receipt of your stake asset. So it's pretty much like free the liquidity of your stake asset. Mm-hmm. And the reason that why we need this protocol, I mean, itself, by this protocol itself, it also provides a lot of utility for your stake dot or stake Kusama. For example, if you stake dot right now, and if you want to unstake that, that's a 28 days unbounding period. And some people might not want to wait that long, and they would like to have this incentive of retaining the transferability of their dots, but they don't want to give out their stake reward. So they can stake through this Homa protocol. What the Homa protocol does is that it creates a pool, and we're gonna stake the dot or Kusama trustlessly through our smart contracts, through our Parachain for you, and what you get is a receipt of a stake dot, and you are, by having this receipt, you're also earning the stake reward. And what it enables us is that you can also use your stake receipts as collateral to bow and to locking into that position and to take a loan out of that. So you don't have to compete. So if you have dot, you don't have to compete against like, I want to stake that or I want to lock it. I think that's very important for any sort of capitalized stablecoin protocol that built on top of proofs of stake network, because otherwise you are competing. People want to create a loan using their stake assets, competing, like otherwise they would be used for earning the return, right?
Right, and that's interesting you say that, because obviously Ethereum is moving across to this with the Ethereum 2.0 as well. So again, that agnostic nature is exciting for the way you built this in. Now, Betty, in context with, or just in sync with the underlying protocols, you had the products as well. So you have things like the dApps, the console, and another thing you talk about with the active data of telemetry. I think that's how you pronounce it. Do you want to just touch on products just really broadly so that we understand that there is this correlation between the protocols and the products?
Oh yeah, definitely. So obviously, Acala is a chain on its own. So, the telemetry and also the block explorer is just a backend way that you can, watch how the block is being produced and what transactions being sent. And also once you send a transaction, whether it's been finalized and things like that, you can use those tools to, it's like Etherscan in a way. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, a lot of the end users won't be exposed to that straight away. There are a couple of ways that end users can use Acala. One is, you can go straight to the web app of like apps.acala.network just to use those products that Ruitao mentioned straight away. And then another way is like Polka Wallet, as also the founding member of the team, they've provided that natively via their iOS and also Android mobile app. So there's a wallet, and it also, you can do all the collateralization, all the trading, and etc. on a mobile app natively. So it's quite friendly if you do it that way. Right. And then behind the scene, Polkadot also provides this console where you can interact with the chain without much programming. So you can interact directly with the chain's logic. So for example, Ruitao mentioned Honzo as the stablecoin protocol. There's a very friendly, you can just like click a couple of buttons. You can call the Honzo, say create a loan for me, and then you enter a number of parameters like how much you want to collateralize, how much you want to borrow, and then it will perform all the actions for you automatically using the Polkadot.js SDK, right? Got it. And of course, when you're doing some testing, you can also put in your JavaScript code there to do some function calls, etc. So and you can also do it directly, right? You just program it directly as well. So the full toolkit is quite complete. So for anyone who want to explore and also build on top of, everything is already out there. And we already have quite a number of ecosystem teams, like people who's interested to use Acala or build on top of Acala. They already started. So you will see quite soon, some teams will come out with their first prototype or POC or test network that will be launched on Acala and also connect to the outer world. For example, the Bitcoin world, right? Bring Bitcoin onto Acala, for example.
Yes, so I was reading about that, and both BTC or Bitcoin and Ethereum, there's plans for integration of both, as I understand, in the Acala network.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. So there are also many different options as well, which is good. So there's trustless version of Bitcoin. I think Interlay is building, and then there's also more federated and also other approaches for Bitcoin to coming onto Acala as well. There's also native way that Bitcoin can come straight to Acala as well. So then people can have a choice. What version of Bitcoin they trust more, they want to use more, or more comfortable with.
So you're building in flexibility, and I'm sure for all those proponents of Bitcoin, it's great to hear that also is being taken seriously as an asset, for inclusion in your design. Now, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about specifically, it's referenced a great deal. Perhaps Ruitao, you can tell us a bit more about the DSWF, that Decentralized Sovereign Wealth Fund. It's really important for your bigger picture. So what's it all about?
Yeah, so if we look at the current DeFi protocol out there, most of them have this native token that reflect the value they captured of this protocol, of this network, right? So if you look at MakerDAO, what they have is that they have some profit from the stability fee, and what they do with this surplus, they use this profit to buy back MKR and burn them. That essentially is giving this profit, giving dividend to the token holders. We can have the similar approach when we're designing this Acala network. There would be a native token that represents the governance and all the value capture in this network. And we will have some surplus from the operation of like this Liquidity protocol, from the stability fee, or from the decentralized exchange. There will be the surplus of the network. We can use that to buy back the native token and burn it. But while we were thinking that why do we want to burn it, when we can use it to much better usage. So on Polkadot, the share security concept is that you need to have some dot holders to support you. And they need to bound their dot to secure your Parachain slot. And this process is what we call the Parachain offering or the Parachain auction. So you need to attract enough dot holder to support you. It's pretty much like you were renting a shard from the Polkadot network, right? And we're pretty confident we are able to achieve that. We have a community forum, we have a solid project. But when we have this profit, when we have this shard and then we start to generate profit, we were thinking that if we're generating profit, why don't we use this profit to buy dots? It's like, to put it in like simple ways, that you are renting this shard and gradually, because you are doing a good business, you are gradually owning part of this building. And yes, to a point that you completely own this building, and then you don't have to, you can pretty much pay your own rent. Your business can pretty much pay your own rent. At that point, you are share of substance on the Polkadot
right.
network.
So essentially, you're gathering those acorns. You're saving through that fund.
Yes, and then what's even amazing is that now these dots or this token that this surplus the network gather is not belong to anyone. It's belong to this protocol itself. And ultimately, it's belong to all the token holders. That means the value captured in the native token is not only the underlying protocol, the technology is also captured. It's like this decentralized sovereign wealth fund. So you also have a share on this sovereign wealth fund.
And that's what right, and that's what I wanted to touch on, because that is quite interesting to the token holder, the native token holders. That's music to their ears, because that's another reason for value capture. More generally in the ecosystem. Okay, so if you want to know more, make sure you look at the links below. I'll make sure there's links to specifically details about that fund. So thanks for explaining that. Now, one of the things I also want to touch on with you, Bette, you mentioned a bit about this before, with regard to some of the projects that are coming forth. There's also significant sort of ecosystem built around this. The names of, for example, Moonbeam, Xpol, Ontology, Centrifuge, Plasm, and the list goes on. These are all referenced as part of a broader ecosystem. So what's it like to know that you're also, working within the context of significant technologies, significant teams, all building for the same vision, and that is to, integrate into mainstream? It must be great knowing that you have those people beside you.
Yeah, definitely. I think as a community project, ecosystem is probably at the crust of its core value. Is like we're all building together, but the space is so huge, so we all need different sort of effort and expertise to expand the network. So the names that you mentioned, right? So Acala just provides the finance fundamentals. There will be teams who will be using Acala. So for example, Plasm, they are layer 2, so they are onto scalability and payment channels, for example. So the AUSD can actually port onto Plasm and then do more interesting use cases over there. And then also some other teams, they may not have their own network. They just want to land on Acala. Like, some Bitcoin bridges, they want to come on to Acala and then provide their Bitcoin, liquidity to Acala. But then they need a use case on top of that, right? Once you've got Bitcoin, what do you use it? You can trade, you can collateralize for some liquidity, or do some other more interesting stuff, right? So I think the building block that Acala is providing is almost there. I think people can see, it can already start itself once we go live, right? Which hopefully it will be quite soon on Kusama first, and then Polkadot soon after. And then once that kick starts, you will see, more apps that should be able to come on to Acala and build more interesting use case onto it. So people also didn't realize there's a pathway you can come on to Polkadot, because I think the first impression is when you come to Polkadot, you have to build a chain, you have to become a parachain. But that is like not the case. The parachain is also only one option to build on Polkadot, as you actually do on-chain yourself. But there's also other ways. For example, if you are a smart contract builder on Ethereum, you can deploy your smart contract, a Solidity contract, straight away on Acala for your DeFi app. Or if you want to choose more native version, there's also Ink smart contract that you can build and deploy on Acala as well. And those are more lightweight and requires less technical and also commercial requirements to deploy your application and have it going on day one, right?
I see. So options are built in that sense. Now, one of the things I just want to jump in and talk to you about is Kusama. You referenced that. A lot of people assume, perhaps erroneously, that that's an unaudited sort of network, the wild canary cousin. But in fact, it has a lot of advantages for those perhaps who, can't start with the very, very robust, very conservative and very technical and, nature of Polkadot. Sometimes it's, for the young upstarts or the young startups, they are really going to perhaps, start to look towards Kusama as something legitimate and really useful. So do you want to just touch on that as well in the context of the potential of Kusama, leading out a very important part of a broader ecosystem?
Sure, Ruitao?
Yeah, so when Kusama launched, they will have this name of like the Canary Network, right? So, but I think we need to start to consider that Kusama itself is also a mainnet. It's like a living decentralized version of Polkadot already. It just has a lower value. So the position that we're taking at this stage is that there's like currently two network, two living production network. This is Kusama, which is more flexible with less value. When we talk about flexible, it's like the governance, the block era, all these limitation was slightly
relaxed
on Kusama. Yeah, relaxed on Kusama. So you can try some idea on Kusama first, or for some apps, or for some project, they might just want to deploy on Kusama. It's no different from like deploying on Kusama or deploying Polkadot. But on Kusama, all this rule is relaxed. It's a ground for you to grow. And if you're able to graduate, then, or if you need bank grade security, or if you're like really serious, then you can go to the Polkadot mainnet. So this is like this Kusama network that we used to call Canary Network, but I don't think we should call it Canary Network anymore. It's more of like an adventurous, low value, slightly lower value network, production network, and then this Polkadot is the mainnet. So if you want to build a bank, like Acala what we're doing is like we're building a bank on the Polkadot, then you look for the highest level of security, which is the Polkadot network. And then if you want to build like a small game, then maybe you can try it on Kusama, where it costs less, it's more flexible. And for Acala, we actually want to do it in two places. The reason is that then we also have a canary network of the Acala network running on Kusama as well.
I see.
If you want to test, if you want to test out something, we can test out on Kusama first, and to make sure that everything's work. It's very important that you test all these different changes in the real environment where money is really has values.
And I love hearing that you also have that capacity too, just like Kusama to Polkadot. So you're emulating that sort of stepping stone process. Gives us more confidence knowing that you built that in. So let's progress on, because obviously there's a lot to talk about, but it's exciting to hear that you're really working in sync with the vision of Polkadot in the way that you essentially check your own security, check your own performance, and most importantly, lead into what will be a very robust system for Acala as well, just like Polkadot is, as that highly secure, highly conservative relay chain, system. Now, built in, Ruitao, you have also the price stability mechanisms that are really important, actually, for just the overall trust that you have for the stablecoin model. So, in that, risk management, adjusted liquidation, adjusted oracles, lot in there in the white paper. But do you want to just touch on the importance of having the mechanisms themselves?
Yeah, so I mean the stabilization of the stablecoin, it's MakerDAO inspired. So there's not it's pretty much like, as long as you maintain a collateralization ratio that's above the system's requirement, then the system the integrity should be preserved. But there's a number of things that I would like to discuss, that what we improved on Acala compared to existing, for example, MakerDAO as the implementation. So first is that on Acala, one of the most important thing, Oracle. So we all know what happened on the Black Friday, where there's congestion on the Ethereum network. The price Oracle is fail or is slow to update, and that's why it caused this the undercapitalization of the MakerDAO's stablecoin. Right. On Acala, what we approach different is because we are able to customize down to the core logic. We are able to optimize the Oracle fitting mechanism initially to a whitelist address, and you don't actually have to pay gas fee in order to fit fit price into the system. And what even better is that whatever the Oracle operator is fitting, those transactions will be treated as priority transaction, and they will be guaranteed to be included to the next block. So pretty much we use the quality of service on transaction as well. We know those transactions is very important. It gotta be included in the next block. So we will eliminate the risk of that the price update is not fast enough. Right. The other improvement that we have a slight improvement here is that things we built the decentralized exchange right into the core level. We are able to use it as a source of liquidity for when the liquidation comes in as well. So imagine there's an unsafe position that need to be liquidated, and someone bid $1 in the same way that they did on MakerDAO, and it end up to the highest bid. What the system is going to do is it's going to compare the $1 to what's the liquidity on the decentralized exchange, and it will find out that actually the decentralized exchange price is better. So the system will then liquidate through the decentralized exchange. So it's like the last shot of defense rather than just relying on an auction process. So that's another improvement for the system integrity as well.
And that's good to hear, because it sounds like you guys have really focused on the essentially building upgrades, not just the mechanisms, but looking at what hasn't worked in the past or what has been problematic, and making sure that you have those safeguards built into the mechanisms. So thanks for explaining that. Now, Bette, one thing I really wanted to talk to you about, and I don't like to add in FOMO, but when I did see these, it was really interesting, and that's your partners. Let's talk about them. Polychain, very respected VC in the space, all the way through to very innovative in capital firms as well, like Web3 Capital, KR1, which I'm watching closely at the moment, Hashkey, Web3 Foundation. I wasn't surprised by that. It makes sense. Berkeley is involved, Stake Zone, and then SNZ, and the list goes on. But what I was interested in is that you have partners now that are really looking towards the next level of innovation. You don't have necessarily all the old VCs of time gone by, but you have those who are looking for more, perhaps, and that is technology that's driving business of tomorrow. So having these partners is a big deal.
You're quite right on the dollar, because when we first look out for backers or supporters in that regard, we look for a number of things. And firstly is decentralization at heart. That's why you see it's quite a variety or diversity of the VCs. They all, located in different geographical locations, and they may occupy a different sort of space in the VC realm as well. And that's certainly one thing that we actually intentionally did at the beginning. And then the second thing was ourselves, like we are in it for a long game. So we're not here to just like do a splash and then run away.
Great.
And that actually
puts
requires
you in a very small group of initiatives, because we see too many pump and dumps and too many running away with the money. So that's really important that you say that.
Hopefully people come out of the bubble now. They're a bit more mature, right? Hopefully, we are meeting more teams that's in a space that's, serious builders, especially I think in the Polkadot or Web3 sort of friends, or, similar sort of ideal groups. They're more builders and in it for long term. And that's why when we look for backers, they got to be a long term as well. A lot of times, once you have backers or investors, if they are not aligned with your ideal, then sometimes you're doing things that you didn't want to do.
Yes, and we've really seen that happen as well, Betty, with regard to the pressures some of the VCs have actually put on the teams, with regard to try and making sure that they can capitalize on their investment. So one thing I wanted to ask is, yes, it's really clear that, you're focused on working with a group of investors essentially that are going to align with your long-term vision. But have you also built in the mechanics to make sure that they can't actually go and dump on, not just the retailer, but you guys as well? That's important.
Love that question, because we have a great answer. Like all of those are actually not just built on contract, which is the traditional way, but also built on chain. So on the Genesis, a lot of those rules, like how the VCs or what they've invested can be managed and how they actually can use those tokens are actually managed on chain. So it's transparent, and also it's predictable, right? So and that also courtesy to all the VCs, who's also having similar ideal, right? Because they have that decentralization, also transparency at heart, same as us. So they agree to all of those things. So.
And I love it because it keeps them in check, literally, with regard to the transparency. And I think that's important also for the future of the retail industry, and also those supporting Acala's token, knowing that there is that synergy of the long-term vision between yourselves and the VCs, because in the past we've seen the likes of some VCs acting in a way that wasn't conducive of a long-term vision. So I really appreciate that response. Now, one of the things I also want to talk about very quickly is the proof of liveness retail, because you have those partners as well, not just partners with regard to the backing.
Yeah. So, the way that we designed the network, like what you want to come launch as a Parachain on Polkadot, right? You don't have to run validators, but what you do is that you need to run collectors, because we are a chain, we are attached to Polkadot. What we don't need is we probably don't need like 1,000 nodes to make sure there's enough decentralization, and that's what we call the security provided by the Polkadot network. But we do need like maybe 20, maybe 30 nodes, ideally across the globe, to provide as an entry point to package the transaction and submit them into the relay chain, into the Polkadot mainnet. And that's what we call a collector. That's what we call maybe a node in our network. It's less concerned about security. It's more concerned about that you will be there packaging the transaction and then put it on top of the Polkadot relay chain. And that's why we have this proof of liveness network. They are already committed, and they will be working with us when we launch the network. You will have similar staking strategy, like you can delegate some of your native tokens to those proof of stake, pool of liveness partners to earn a little bit of reward as well. So I think it's similar to staking, but it's not about security. It's about that, hey, there's gonna be a million of like 10 or 20 nodes. They be there for you when you need to send a transaction.
Right. Okay. So things like entities like Anchor, Figment Network, it goes on Chorus, on Finality. If you want to know more, obviously there'll be links to the website and others where you can read into them. Now, here's a tough question, guys. So roll up your sleeves. We're going to be talking about the token right now. ACA, I wanted to understand that in more detail in terms of, yes, it's a native token, but can we discuss more of its true utility nature, so that we can clarify and be assured that it's not just simply, a token for speculation?
Well, I think for a protocol or for a network to capture all its values, all the value need to reflect it in the native token of this particular network, right? So that's what the ACA token, one of the core functionality of the ACA token. The other more important functionality is the governance. So you essentially, by holding the ACA token, you are the owner of the network rather than just the development team. Our ultimate goal is to make ourselves irrelevant. Like if the network can survive and without us contributing to it, then we will claim ourselves successful. But I don't want to talk about too much about the actual allocation or things like that. But what we can say is that we reserve a majority of the token to be minted, to be rewarded to any early adopters, to any users, to proof of liveness node operators, to oracles. So we would like this network to become truly owned by the community, operated by the community. That's our goal from day one, and that's our goal till the end of this, maybe not the end, but till this network succeeds into a true decentralization.
Right, and Bette, what was interesting also with regard to the way this was set up, you also had an IPO, and people may assume that, to be something in Wall Street, but really this is about an initial Parachain offering that was available. And then you also have the tokens going to different parts as well, like the seed investors we've talked about, the foundation, but most importantly, the public. So it does seem the public is the paramount sort of, cohort that's of focus in this design. But I still want to understand a little bit more about the distribution. How is it that the public are going to really capitalize on engagement with a utility token of this nature?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand the nature of the chains that we're looking at today. So Acala alike, Substrate or Polkadot alike, they are essentially an agency. So it's not just a plain chain as what we had before, like the isolated ones. An agency means it's like an organization of people with similar purposes. They're able to act through the organization, right? And this we couldn't do before. So for example, in a DAO incident that we had on Ethereum, for example, there was a mistake being made, but you cannot act. There's no agency, basically. There's no a place that it can represent people's wills. It cannot take action. Whereas on Acala, it is essentially an agency. So it is essentially somewhere all the token holders have the power to change the course and the future of where the network is going, and then how all the revenues that's been generated should and how they should be distributed, as well as where it should be invested, right? That was referring to the wealth fund that's talked about. So you got to look at it with a different sort of lens, as the token holders is really powerful, right?
Yes,
because ultimately they can upgrade the chain logic to do something may be quite different from what we are currently doing, right, in years ahead. And also collectively, they can decide the welfare of how the profits get generated or back to return to the token holders. So it's important that at the beginning, when we bootstrap, there are some seed investors helping us to bootstrap this network, but majority of the tokens are going to be distributed to the ecosystem one way or another. Like we haven't got a detailed plan exactly how that's going to be executed, but we have some ideas, right? So Ruitao mentioned that if people are helping us for an important milestone, which is the IPO, like the initial Parachain offering, which is helping us to get security first, right? So that's that's the egg or the chicken, whichever way you look at it. You got to get that first. So for people who are helping us to get to that milestone, they will get quite significant reward over the years, not all at once, because it's more rational to distribute it over a period of time. And then that's one way. And there could also be many other ways for incentivizing people providing liquidity, and also many different ways that we can do that as well.
And that's going to lend itself well with a marketing strategy too, because having that long-term incentivization scheme essentially is going to really attract a lot of different kinds of people, and certainly the right kinds of people if the gearing is all about trying to strengthen, the integrity of the network itself. So will we see more of this in terms of clarification of what different bounties perhaps are out there, what you can do on Acala?
Yeah, definitely. That's something that we're actually currently working on right now. And then as soon as we have more information, we actually would love more community involvement as well. So as soon as we have information, we'll actually tell people.
I'm sure that everyone's going to be listening and finding out more about Acala in the coming months. Now, with regard to the roadmap, I want to touch on that in the context of the token as well. With MainNet, with release, what is the actual plan? Do you have finite times or clear time references that you can give us in the roadmap so we know what's coming?
Yeah, I think we pretty much at the current development status is so pretty much reached to a code complete status. There's still like these numbers we need to polish, like the distribution, like the rewarding schema that Bette talked about earlier. But in terms of function wise, we are pretty much ready to go. Just doing the final pieces. So we are working very closely with the Parity teams to make sure that when Parachain functionality is available, we will be the first to bow. We will be the first to go live. The plan was always to go live on Kusama first, and then to go live when the Parachain functionality is available on the Polkadot mainnet. We think maybe within a month or two, we could go live on Kusama. There's a rough target date that we're looking at this stage. Again, this is like it has dependency on when Parachain is available and when Kusama is upgraded to enable people to bound Parachain. But that is the rough plan. And then after we go live on Kusama, there could be another 2 or 3 months before Polkadot see the similar functionality enabled.
I see. So really, we're talking about within the next 4 months. There's a lot happening for you. So you must have a lot of activity in the background trying to prepare for this, because it's a big deal to move into Kusama and then move across to make sure that everything is going to work efficiently in that sequence. So exciting times. The launch, not that far away. Certainly, 2020 is a big year for Acala. What sort of would you like to say to those people who, I guess, are considering, looking into Acala? If they want to look more into it, what's your key statement you want to mention? Given that literally everything about Acala.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to look at is that everything that we develop is available right now on the live testnet. So if you go to Acala.network or if you go to apps.acala.network, or if you go to our GitHub, we have a whole set of documentation that allow you to get some test tokens, allow you to actually try what we have built. Look at the source code. So everything is transparent. We are pushing development every single day. But the thing is that the product is almost already there. So give it a try and see how you look and feel about this ecosystem that we built on top of Polkadot. We are open to discussion. We have a Telegram channel. We have a Discord channel. All the core developer was in the channel. So it's now the time for, like, if you are interested in this project, give it a try. And you might have some ideas. Get in touch with us, join our Telegram, join our Discords, and who knows, maybe there will be even some candy reward for some valuable suggestion at this stage.
Who knows? What about you, Bette? You must be excited about what's coming with regard to literally everything we've been talking about. What's the thing that most excites you about Acala going forward?
Oh, I think what Ruitao says sums up the spirit, right? Don't look, get your hands dirty, right? So I think that's a message for the people who's looking at Acala right now. Just go and try it out. And then again, for me is we're at the transition point. As soon as we go live and bound to Kusama and even Polkadot, there's real value floating, right? So you will see real dollar amount going through. And then that's the point where we will begin to actually the next chapter of Acala. So right now we're more of a very tight internal circle, probably mostly predominantly within the Polkadot ecosystem. We're very well known within Polkadot. But I think once it's gone live and then we got some real usage also connected to the outer world, that will be a point where our story will be, grow even further. And I can't actually wait for the day where we can actually mint Acala dollar, and then it actually gets to the hands of individuals around the world. I think that will be a day that's worth some celebration.
Absolutely. That's a time to crack the corks, because you've worked a lot to get to that point. And, obviously we're not here to FOMO, but the reality is that there is something exciting building in Acala. Now, the long-term vision, you've explained that. What is interesting is that, long-term, hopefully you can establish that very, I guess, ambitious goal of trying to have your own blockchain design as well. But for right now, it's that Parachain focus. The roadmap, we've touched on that, with your mainnet alpha, with the Parachain options, the stablecoin enablement, the staking liquidity, the cross chains, really exciting in that capability. So much is happening. I'm going to put all of the social media links down below for those who want to know more about specifically Acala, but certainly don't hesitate to, contact people like Bette, people like Ruitao. They are there in Telegram sometimes dropping in. And it's important, that we do engage. We do know that we have power as a community to understand more about what is essentially, innovation of the future for finance and beyond. Now, let's move across. Another thing that we wanted to talk about in this long interview was Laminar. Now, it's interesting, Ruitao, you know a great deal about that. You're both co-founders of it as well. Open finance platform, doing a lot with regard to synthetics and margin assets. So, Ruitao, I might start with you on this. Laminar is a big deal when it comes to money.
Yeah, we think there's like a lot of variety that exists in the current conventional finance world is not available on blockchain right now. We do see there's more demands on different type of variety. So for example, if you look at the Tesla stock right now, it's going up maybe like crazy, and people would like to enjoy that sort of exposure to the stock market on blockchain in a decentralized way. And that's what we are aiming to go for. I think it's a pretty niche market. It's pretty, and it has a lot of attraction to existing crypto traders. There's also conventional trader. They were trying to looking for some exposure on crypto as well. So what we enable is that we want to enable this fully decentralized trading platform. So you can pretty much speculate on any sort of asset that's got, as long as there's enough liquidity, as long as there's a marketplace for that.
Yes, well, I think we can remove the point of if, because we know there is a marketplace. We've already seen a lot of that evidence. But one thing I did want to ask you is, how on earth do both of you sleep? Because when I looked at the scope of Acala, I immediately thought that is a project that would take all of your time, surely. But you're building, both of you, Laminar, which is another really important sort of vertical within this space, certainly DeFi driven. How do you do this? How do you manage to be co-founders of both?
We deep down the loop, we need to thank that. Every one of our co-founders high achievers. So we consider us not only so our CTO, Brian, he's not here today. He's like a 10x engineer, or even like more than 10x engineer. Mm-hmm. So Bette is like a 10x COO. I consider myself very productive as well. So we are lucky enough that the founding team members share the same vision. They were also all high achievers. It's very important for the startup phase of this period, right? Everyone needs to work extremely hard to achieve. Maybe at some stage when we grow, when there's actual transaction, when there's actual cash flow coming in, we might be able to scale. But the start period is the most important critical moments. And we will have to say that, hey, we are lucky enough that pretty much the whole team is a team of high achievers.
Right. Well, Bette,
I want to add is people in the founding team, they're also very passionate. Truly decentralization or the crypto, so sort of diehard people in the area. So a lot of times you don't need to have a stake or even carrot at some point. The people are actually intrinsically wanted to do something, make a difference, and they can also see the vision that laid out in front of them. It's quite achievable, and then something we built is actually quite impactful, like giving the feedback and the stuff that we've seen. So a lot of us intangible sort of feel that goes into the whole team. Yeah.
And Bette, it's great to hear that, because a lot of the members of teams like this, they actually gave up serious money and serious jobs full-time positions to go and pursue what is essentially, an endeavor that they're passionate about. So they may be foregoing some initial, revenue or initial full-time salaries, but it's because of this kind of passion that they have. So I really appreciate you, adding that aspect of the team's endeavor. Now let's get real about what we've already seen. We've seen a lot of interest in the synthetics and in margin trading, obviously too. So there's already precedents that are very, very strong in DeFi. But then we move across to all the things we talked about with Acala, having that coupling, having that and then everything else we talked about behind it. That must be something that sets you in very good positioning for the future when it comes to, adding to the tech stack and adding to, the already, very saturated market, perhaps with regard to synthetics, or maybe it isn't saturated, but there is a huge, push in Ethereum, for example, with the market share there.
Yeah, definitely. So we would see that the synthetic asset trading or the margin trading protocol that we're building on Laminar right now is actually a companion of the Acala protocol. I mean, obviously, we'll be using the AUSD as the base currency for speculating, for trading on top of the Laminar chain, right? And it is like the one key advantage that we have on this synthetic and margin trading is because we were backed by a different set of investors. So they were pretty much convention financial institutes that looking to exploring opportunity on the decentralized space, on the blockchain space. We are able to tap in their existing customer bases. They already have very good customer acquisition network, and they already have a set of very mature, high value individual traders, high frequency traders that we're able to tap into. While we think it's a nice thing to have, we prepare to convert some of those customers on the blockchain. We're not thinking that all of them we're going to convert, but I think some of them already express interest in like, hey, we would like to trade some Bitcoin, we would like to trade in a decentralized way. And that's a huge advantage for us. One of the competitive advantage of us is that we already have this existing customer bases we're able to tap into. They were trading in a centralized way. They were looking to other options to enable more transparency, to have their trading rule being guaranteed by smart contract. So we're able to tap into that. And that's one of the key point of like having this protocol.
Yes, and Ruitao, I wanted to sort of extrapolate or extend on that because I think it's underestimated just how powerful it is to have what is stated in your information as the VC-backed decentralized finance protocol company. Now, company came up in my mind straight away, and also the VC-backed aspect. Now, when you talk about those parties, you alluded to the importance of having those who are well invested already in that centralized sort of aspect of finance moving across. And then looking at that with regard to already well-established companies, again, that key word, I think there's a big deal there with you, and you're not telling us all of it. I think that just the scope of some of these VCs or this backing you have and this connection is significant to move across and migrate to something like Laminar.
Yeah, I mean, while I cannot disclose too much information right now, but what we feel excited is that a lot of conventional financial institutes, they are already exploring the blockchain space. Now, I mean, if we back in 1 or 2 years ago, people didn't consider us seriously. They were thinking like this is just magic internet money. The main one day was like $0, maybe like back in 4 years ago. But now all these serious players, all these conventional institutions, they realize that Bitcoin or anything crypto cannot be ignored anymore. Their customers demand them to provide exposure to cryptocurrency. So that's why we're feeling excited about like some of those financial institutes that we get in touch with. Is that they were seeing the way that's like if they don't change, they might become irrelevant, and that's like that's what we feel excited about.
Sure.
Now, the keyword is inevitable. Because we took Laminar to the Singapore FinTech Festival last year. We don't know if we could go again because of COVID this year. So FinTech Fest is like 65,000 like turn-ups like from the finance world, right? And there are a lot of people interested in this type of applications, and also like they can see it's possible, like they have more liberating way of trading and also get exposure. Like I think the crypto people get exposure to the mainstream, trading opportunities, but also the other side, the other way as well. Like a lot of the mainstream, asset managers, they're also looking at crypto with very interested eyes. So I think it's in a great space to be that bridge, which is Laminar.
And Betty, I'm so glad you mentioned, your involvement in Singapore, because not only is it a hub for regulation, it's a hub for blockchain. And if you're attending those kind of conferences, again, that reassures us in the crypto space, because crypto is, a pretty small community comparatively to the potential of the other side. Where it is the enterprise, it is the big business, it is all the potential there, and you're engaging in both worlds, and that is important. Now, let's move it back to the protocols for a moment. Synthetics, margins, money. I wanted to understand more about the status or the position you're in terms of the development of those protocols. How far are you ahead in the roadmap?
So we pretty much, so for the synthetic and margin trading protocol, we pretty much finished the development of it. We are getting ready to get our audits on the Ethereum Solidity smart contract side. So for Laminar, we are blockchain agnostic. We're going to deploy on maybe on Ethereum, maybe on other blockchain that is already crypto users, and then most importantly, we're going to deploy on top of Polkadot. So on Laminar Protocol side, well, on Ethereum side, we're pretty much are waiting to get on some audit, and then we can onboard the initial set of liquidity. On the Substrate, on the Polkadot event, we are at a very similar status as well. There's also a public testnet going to be announced maybe within the next 1 or 2 weeks. We're going to announce now there's a faucet, now there's a front-end dApp. You can get some fake dollar. You can start to trade on the Substrate side, and on Ethereum side, maybe within a month or two, we'll go live.
Okay, so Laminar is happening soon, sooner than Acala.
Yeah, but on the downside though, it's because on Ethereum, it's because of the block time with the performance bottleneck. We think the pricing that will be offered might not be as good as when Polkadot comes up. We were at this stage, we were thinking it's more of like we were going to deploy a set of proof of concept, proof of security, proof of whatever you call it on Ethereum. And then later on, when people discover that there's a exact same offering on Polkadot, and you can trade a much faster way, you can trade a much better rate, then people might say, hey, maybe there's a better place for me to go to trade.
Right. Well, at least you're treating the Ethereum's network as almost a test bed, for moving across. But still, it's great to see that you are agnostic, and they are both very important networks and ecosystems, as you know. Now, Flow protocols, I want to talk about that. You wrote an interesting article recently, Ruitao, about the on and off chain asset trading value. So do you want to just touch on that in terms of the benefits, because you went into detail about them?
So there's like this. So we look at what currently is available on the blockchain right now. There's very few crypto instrument that you can trade. If you want to trade some real assets or asset that otherwise will be available in abundance on the conventional finance system, it's very hard to find a trustless way to trade this sort of assets. And even if you can, currently almost all the implementation is based on an order book style of order matching. So you are limited to the initial needed liquidity for you to trade efficiently. But if you look at the off-chain world, if you look at currently what's in the conventional finance system, if you want to trade Euro USD, if you want to trade CFD, if you want to trade stock, there's vast amount of liquidity out there. Like you can just go as a liquidity provider or as any sort of broker, you can tap into those large institutes. If you want to trade Forex, you can have an account with Deutsche Bank, and it's like trading in a billion or even more than billion, maybe trillions of scale. So we were thinking like, now there's tons of liquidity off-chain and there's not much liquidity on-chain. How can we bridge this? How can we make sure that we can somehow, through a trustless protocol, expose those liquidity to the blockchain world? And that's why we come up with this Flow protocol. What it does down into the hood is that pretty much we have two roles. There's the trader. A trader, can just say that I want to open a position, and then I was just going to forget about that. My profit and loss is guaranteed by the smart contract. As long as the price moves, my profit and loss is guaranteed, and then I can be so sure that if I win $100, I can get out of that. And then this other side is what we call the liquidity provider. The liquidity provider will then provide liquidity and act as a counterparty for the traders. And why would they want to become a liquidity provider? Well, because they are able to source liquidity from the real world. So like, for example, if they are exposed for like a lot of USD or Euro USD on the blockchain, they can offset that risk to the conventional finance world, and they're pretty much like they were just earning a little bit of spread. Or they can choose to have their own trading strategy, and that's what happened in the real world. Most of the brokers, they have their own trading strategy. They will say that, okay, probably I will just hedge maybe 5% of my euro position, because I'm really long on euro, so I'm happy to take that. So we were just trying to connect this platform to connect the conventional way of trading and put it as an offering in a decentralized world.
Right, and obviously liquidity is king when it comes to developing something like this. That's why I was so interested in how you are trying to ascertain strong, potential for liquidity. Now, Betty, one of the things that I really liked about the way that you built this is you have the multiple liquidity pools built in as well. So do you want to just touch on that in the context of liquidity as we've been discussing, so that we understand that there's real preparations for the future of Laminar?
Yeah, sure. So Laminar is an open platform, right? So on there, anyone can become a liquidity provider, provided that you're willing to put in the liquidity there, and then of course you are at your own risk to be able to do some hedging or do some risk management stuff. But from our white paper, we also provide a set of recommendations that you should look at. The risk profiles that's provided by the platform, and also how you could potentially hedge those risks. And initially, that's also the lucky part, is like we would have a couple of already committed liquidity providers. So when traders come to the Laminar Flow exchange, they will already have someone to trade against, right? But of course, the pools, they are, so on Ethereum, it's like smart contracts that you just deploy. It's all in the open right there. We already have test smart contracts on Ethereum. People can look at it and look at what the parameters are, and can start trying that out, right? And then on Laminar chain, on the Substrate side, it's done in a similar approach, but of course not smart contract, but built as runtime modules, so more integral part of the blockchain logic. But again, at the same time, people are open to set up their liquidity pools, and also set up their own parameters, because each liquidity pool can have their set of supported trading pairs, as well as spreads they are willing to accept, and also things like swap and stuff, if they're doing off-chain hedging and things like that. And those things, it's all in the open. But of course, early on, we're quite willing to actually work with any liquidity provider, who's serious about building this as part of their business. Come and discuss with us and see what sort of tooling that we can provide, as well as some risk management parameters that we can support as well.
Sure.
So now is the time to talk, actually.
Yes, and that's why I mentioned it, because I do imagine that there'll be more interest in this from significant parties in the crypto space with regard to trying to support what you're doing in terms of liquidity provision. The team itself, I had a look. It's very similar to the quality of the team in Acala. Some of the names come up and repeat. Very strong engineering. So for people who want to know more about the team, look at the team. It's all transparent there. But moving beyond that, I want to touch on again this idea of a tokenized margining position. Because the tokenized aspect, I think we really do need to touch on to better understand what is the plan with Laminar as we move forward.
Yeah, so we have a tokenized synthetic asset protocol for now. So you want to, for example, I have a DAI on Ethereum and I want to swap that to a euro. I can do that. And pretty much my euro value is governed by the smart contract. It's going to check the exchange rate between US dollar and euro. So that's what we call a synthetic synthetic asset. For the margin trading at this stage, it is still right within the smart contract. We were looking to tokenize the margin as a transferable token at some stage, but for now we haven't actually implemented yet. We have some ideas, but that's like there's a lot of balancing that we need to check out, but we are looking at it.
Okay, tell me more, because we want to understand, obviously in the space of crypto, let's be real, when we talk about the idea of token, we want to better understand what is coming, because you're moving fast, in a few weeks heading for Ethereum, that test approach across to Polkadot, soon after, or at some stage. We just had Polkadot DeFi. You were involved in that as well, for both Laminar and Acala, really promoting, I guess, the potential of the whole network. But included in that are a whole bunch of tokens for different things, including potentially Laminar. So give us a bit more direction. What's in the roadmap for specifically for those parties in crypto who are looking to essentially speculate on the development?
Yeah, so pretty much again, the Laminar have a very similar situation as Acala. So everything's pretty much open source on GitHub. We're gonna announce a testnet on both Ethereum and on Substrate, maybe within the next week or so. We are preparing for that, and this is the time for you to do some test trading, to validate, to look at the idea that we put up. And very soon we'll go live on probably like on Ethereum first, and at some stage we'll go live on Polkadot. And once we go live, there's a number of ways that people can engage. You can trade, you can speculate, you can become a liquidity provider, or you can just like become a liquidator. There's a number of roles that we outlined in the document that we wrote in the GitHub. So there's a number of ways that people can participate and ensure this whole protocol has integrity, right?
I see. Well, thank you for that. Now, again, this is going to be a tough question. Feel free not to answer it if you don't want to, but one of the things we do see is the emergence of exchanges, particularly tier 1 exchanges, when we see the likes of Polychain and the kinds of names we've seen in the investment sort of grouping that we've been talking about with Acala, for example. I see, and suppose that this is likely in the long term. So, are you confident that quality exchanges are going to endorse and support you, both for Acala and also for Laminar?
I would say that we have been approached by quite a number of top tier exchanges already.
Of course you have.
I don't want to. But I don't want to disclose too much information about that. I will just talk about the centralized exchange for now. Definitely, we will be at some central exchange, and we'll become confident about that. But sure. I think in the long term, down in the past, I read an article maybe like a week ago. It says that for some trading pairs, the decentralized exchange volume is already exceeding the central exchange. We do think that in the long term, where the liquidity is going to hit on the decentralized exchange. I mean, everyone can see what happened on Uniswap.
Absolutely.
It becomes one of the hottest. Yeah, it becomes one of the hottest place for you to offer token, for you to swap, to trade. It might have the best price if you compare to some centralized exchange. Everything in Uniswap is real. The liquidity is real. The token deposit in the exchange is real. And just think about that. That's built on top of Ethereum. Think about if such a decentralized exchange exists on top of Polkadot, where they have like 100 times better performance. We think that is maybe ultimately where the future goes. Like you don't actually have to go to a centralized exchange to
I totally agree with you. We've seen proof in the pudding. Look at UMA protocol, for example. When it happened on Uniswap, we saw huge buzz. Now, when we see the likes of that happening on Polkadot, you yourselves talking about a DEX as well in that context of Acala, really exciting times. Do you see any concerns though? And this is important when we look at the context of ICOs and IEOs when it comes to the emergence on something like a DEX, especially in the context of UMA and the way that played out. There was a lot of controversy about that in terms of initial capitalization from early investors.
Yeah, I do believe that the idea of having an initial Uniswap offering is great, but whatever that's driving the price, gotta be backing with solid product and transactions. You can speculate for a while, maybe you can speculate for a week or a month, who knows, but down into the roots, whatever that reflect the value of your token, ultimately it would be like actually how much transaction is happening on your network, how much value are able to capture. And we can actually even go back to reflect on a conventional way of calculating how much your protocol is worth. Like there's a PE ratio, like how much are you earning and what's your valuation right now. If it's way over a certain amount of numbers, then there should be alarming signals, like there's too much hype in there. So we think that's but we do think that it's having a initial Uniswap offering. It's like a very good way to reach to a set of like retail investors. If you have a solid product, that's a great way to explore.
Totally agree. And we look at the likes of Kyber, for example, and we see, you know, all these DEXs emerge, Loopring's doing some amazing things. So it's great to see that you're aligned with that DEX vision as well. And certainly Acala is. I can only speculate myself and say I'm really excited about what you're inferring and what you're not telling us as well. That's sometimes as exciting as what you do tell us with Laminar. The roadmap's, you know, long, but there's some big things happening soon. Can tell already in the Q3 space. Now, MainNet's token releases, I don't want you to talk about them in any more sense than you have, but can we expect, you know, MainNet's essentially to be the buzz for Laminar as well soon?
Yeah, I think for both projects, like when we launch into a mainnet status, there might be some release to the public to inject the initial needed circulations. It's very similar for both projects, and I think that's the way they should be, right? We have a product, it's running, there's already transaction happening, and in terms of like Polkadot, it's even better because you have a Kusama network to look at. Hey, it's actually already working. You're already like people are already trading on top of that. So given the confidence of like this, the actual token underlying this network is solid.
Absolutely. I mean, me personally, I'm happy to disclose I'm bullish on Kusama for the same reasons, obviously, and I don't understand why people aren't talking more about Kusama. Now, socials, the social networking, you have similar for Acala. How can people get involved? How can they can start to engage, you know, and better understand exactly what Laminar's doing?
Well, it's very similar to Acala, right? So we're gonna have a Telegram channel. We share the same Discord channel, so it's a good chance to you to jump into our Discord channel right now. Our Discord channel is actually called Polkadot Defi. We would like to plan that this is not only our channel. We hope it become the DeFi space for discussion for everything that's DeFi happen on top of Polkadot. That's why when we hosted the Polkadot DeFi event, we also created this Discord channel. And we were looking for early adopters to come in and chat. We might even open for option, like if you are deep into this space, to join us as a community manager, to join us as a best, how do I say that? Bette, can you say the faith? Yeah, we're looking for early adopters. So get into our GitHub, click all those links, get into the Telegram link when we announce our Telegram group, and get into the Discord channel.
Got it. Well, I'll make sure all the links are there for all the different options people have to engage. Obviously, that's important. Now, one of the things that you did mention here is that recently there was that Polka DeFi initiative. Really exciting. I listened to some of the presentations that are really detailed. But we also see the likes of Ethereum, you know, also trying to nuance the idea of DeFi is directly connected to Ethereum. Yesterday, I had a little bit of a debate with one of the core media ETH devs out there, suggesting that really DeFi is not a trademark in any sense. And it just isn't, you know, despite some that have those direct links to consensus, for example, which is a very enterprise-driven Ethereum initiative, or even just more so with Ethereum more generally. What are your thoughts on this? Is DeFi an open term? Is it something that everyone can use if they literally are representing DeFi?
Oh, I think as soon as you put a label and then you're confined within the label, you start restraining your thinking and the possibility of the future. And then
and what about you, just to give Bette a chance to cough? What about your thoughts with regard to, you know, essentially DeFi? What does it mean holistically?
Yeah, I mean, down in the road, what do you mean by DeFi? Like, in my opinion, Bitcoin itself is DeFi. I got my one coin, I can transfer that in a decentralized way. That's already DeFi. If you're talking about DeFi, it's like having a stable coin and having some otherwise that's available on the convention finance market, and you build a set of smart contracts and put it on Ethereum. If you call that DeFi, then well, I don't think that's a very good way to represent that. I think. The way that we use DeFi is the way that we should use. How do I say? It's pretty much like whatever that we have on the conventional finance world, we can bring that, and then we can have the rule governed by a set of smart contract or by the down to the blockchain itself, and then we can call it the finance apply on top of blockchain. And if you think that's DeFi, I don't think it's gonna be limited to one blockchain. It's like the no-brainer, like the go-to term if you think about, hey, now this is a wheel, the next thing you'll talk about that, and we can build a bicycle out of that.
Exactly. It's almost like the reality of tomorrow. I like to use the idea of refi. It's just reconceptualizing finance, literally.
Yeah,
You know, and we're really, you know, you guys are doing the amazing thing and we get the chance to discuss it with you. So it's an honor for me to do that. Now, just finally, guys, it's been a really long interview. What would you like to say to everyone as two final statements from both of you with regard to both Acala and Laminar, and just anything you want to add, you know, to, I guess, really support the FI movement, the refi, DeFi, CeFi, all the aspects that you're really building towards in the future?
Yeah, I think I want to like call for action because the space today, like if you are a builder or if you are a crypto user, the space is changing dramatically. It becomes a lot easier to build, and there's a lot more possibilities to build like sophisticated software on top of blockchain. And if you want to see how that happened, you can come to Acala or Laminar to see, you know, what we've built. And the door is also open. Like Acala is an open platform. Anyone can come along and talk to us and build together. And then the whole atmosphere is builders supporting builders. We are helping teams to build their first runtime module, for example. And then people come and discuss with us their token models, and we offer help with that. And we also gain a lot of help from the ecosystem, from Web3 Foundation as well. So this is a time where we should all, you know, collaborate and build together. And the infrastructure and tooling is already there. If you're not building it today, you know, what are you waiting for? So yeah, come along and talk to us and start building.
Love that passion. Bette, thank you so much for your time today. I really do appreciate that. It's been a long interview and you've survived it. And I certainly will be doing more to support everything that Acala and Laminar are doing. Now, Ruitao, what are your thoughts? What's your final statement with regard to, you know, just really embracing everything that is exciting about blockchain?
Yeah, I think I'm going to share a more general idea that crypto, the whole crypto movement is still so early. We probably like the early 0.1% of adopters. So every single one of them, of us that working on crypto, it should be consider ourselves friends, like alliance. So we should be preaching the idea. We should be let the remaining 99% of the population that have no idea what crypto is. We should be like consider them as our target market. We are the early adopters. At this stage we should like work together. It's like we are trying to get the whole world to move to the crypto, right? That is my more generalized thought.
Got it. So align as allies, you know, and literally be that front line for innovation to lead out into the broader space. I really like that idea. Both of you, thank you so much as co-founders for both Laminar and Acala. Thank you for educating us about everything. You are the primary source. You are the ones leading out the technology with your team. And it gave us a great insight in this very long interview so that we do have confidence that you're the real deal and that you're building something that is agnostic, that's utilizing some of the best technologies out there with Ethereum and Polkadot and even beyond that. So I wish you all the very best as you continue. Laminar is coming up very soon. Acala, you know, we're talking about 2 months ahead and then 4 months again, as we discussed. So exciting times, and I wish you all the very best.
Well, thank you so much, Brady, for having us. It's a wonderful interview and happy to share all the learnings with your audience. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot, Brad.
You're very welcome. Take care, guys, and I'll be watching.